One of the things I find fascinating every draft season is how certain prospects start off with a lot of buzz and a lot of attention and a lot of hype. And as the season goes along, things start to change. Uh, the buzz around them starts to shift. The narrative around them starts to shift. And their draft stock, that in part is, it seems like, created by draft media and draft Twitter, seems to plummet. Happens every year. There are certain guys that are really, really pumped up, and then they end up falling, it seems like. But maybe it's just more so of reality finally sinking in. Well, one of the guys that fits into this category for me is the quarterback from Michigan State, Connor Cook. Now, in theory, he should be better than he is. In theory, I understand why people were high on him at one point in time. There was a point in time I was pretty high on him too, because he has some impressive traits going for him. He's got the physical measurables to suggest that he could be the type of guy that can hold up to the physical rigors of being a pocket passer for 16 games at the NFL level. 6'4", 215, 220 pounds. You know, he's got some decent height on him, decent bulk on him. So you look at him and you would sit there and say, okay, this is a guy that can hold up. And when you throw in the fact that he's an adequate athlete, he's got some mobility to his game. He's not just some statuesque pocket passer. This is a guy that can move around within the pocket. This is a guy that can scramble out, extend plays, and occasionally pick up some yards with his feet. And you're like, okay, not bad. You got size, and you got some athleticism to you. That's a good physical package to start with, especially when you throw in the fact that he's got a pretty strong arm. He can make all of the required NFL throws. It's not just the fact that he demonstrated some arm strength at the college level. It's when you look at him, you see a guy whose arm translates to the NFL level, more importantly, and you can envision where he could make all of the required throws at different levels of the field, short, intermediate, and deep. He's got arm strength. That's not an issue. And he's got plenty of experience. This is a guy that comes from a successful Michigan State program that made it to the college football playoff this year. They've played in a couple of other bigger bowl games the past couple of years. This guy has won a lot of games in a major conference and had some really, really good games in those big situations and in those big spots. So he's got not only experience, but quality experience and winning experience. And if you're an NFL team, you're looking to change the culture of your team by drafting a young quarterback and building around him, you would think in theory, looking at this guy with as much experience as he has as a 3-year starter, looking at the quality of that starting experience, you sit there and say to yourselves, hey, this is a guy you could build around, especially when you look at him, he projects himself to be a very tough guy. That's something that I noticed on film too, is that he demonstrates the toughness to be able to take some big hits and get right back up. I like that about his game quite a bit, is the fact that he could stand tall, he could take some hits, and it seems like you could rely on him for the most part to be able to answer the bell every time. Now, I know he missed the Ohio State game this year, but in general, seemed pretty tough to me. So you sit there and you say, why aren't people higher on him now? Why is the buzz dying down about him? Well, it's because we've got another year of film on him. We got another year to look at him. And we see some major, major questions and some major areas of concern. Number one, first and foremost, has to be his accuracy. It's just frustrating when you look at the guy with these physical tools and this much experience. He should just flat out be a better thrower of the football than he is. And a lot of times, there are those occasions where guys aren't very accurate at the college level and they become more accurate at the NFL level. But in general, that usually doesn't happen. So when you see a guy that struggles to complete 60% of his passes at the college level, it makes you wonder if he could even complete 50, let alone 55% of his passes at the NFL level. I mean, there are times where he makes some spectacular throws, but then he'll have a guy that's 10 yards in front of him and he'll throw it at his feet, or he'll throw it 5 yards over his head, or he'll throw it 3 yards behind him, and you're like, where the hell did that throw come from? How the hell does that happen? You even had your feet set. You had your shoulders squared up to the target. You stepped through your throw, and you were just that off. And it's been a consistent trait of his over the past 3 years. And it hasn't gotten any better, and that has to be really concerning. He didn't get better at it at the college level. How's he going to get a whole lot better instantly at the NFL level just because he went to a higher level of competition? I also look at his decision-making. At times, it's very, very poor. Very, very poor. And for a guy with that much experience in a big-time conference, you would think that this is a guy who would be smart enough to understand when there's an appropriate time to take a risk and other times where it's not. I mean, there's been times where he'll be taking a sack, and instead of just taking the sack and throwing the football away, he tries to sit there and lateral the ball off and is taken back for a pick six, like in the Rose Bowl against Stanford his redshirt sophomore year. I mean, there are other times too where he throws into triple coverage. There are times where he's got a guy wide open in the flat, and he decides to throw it into this guy that's 15 yards down the field that's got double, triple coverage. It just doesn't make any sense. But it also ties into another major flaw of his game, and that is his field vision. He's bad. I mean, for me, when I look at this guy, he should be a lot smarter than he is from the sense of, I'm not questioning the man's intelligence per se, I'm questioning his football IQ and how it projects on the football field as a passer with the ability to use his eyes to move defenses, to move the zone, to be able to go through his progressions. I mean, time after time after time, I would consistently watch Connor Cook throughout his 3 years at Michigan State. And I'm looking, and I'm even seeing on film, I'm like, oh, that running back's open out of the flat. This guy's open. And time after time, he's just locked onto his primary target. I mean, he's a one-read guy, and that's it. And I usually don't like those guys for the NFL level. And that's a major area of concern. NFL teams are already going to be incredibly concerned about his accuracy. Now you throw into the fact that he sometimes makes some really, really bad decisions, even though he generally takes care of the football. Sometimes he makes some really bad decisions. Those really bad decisions could be increased and multiplied when he gets to a higher level of competition. Now you look at a guy that basically you can sit there as an NFL defense and say, hey, wherever he looks first, that's where he's going. That's not good. You know, and then you got the questions of consistency. He has those really, really good games and those games that are not so much. And there are times where he should just be better than he is. And that's what's maddening because other times he's incredible. But there are other times he's not. And then you also have those concerns about his leadership. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I don't know the guy personally, so I can't sit there and say what type of character he has per se. I haven't seen him get arrested a bunch off the field or say a lot of dumb, stupid crap. But you have the thing with people perceiving a slight by him at the Big Ten championship game of Archie Griffin, and it just kind of fed into this leadership narrative of the fact that he's been at Michigan State, an experienced winning quarterback, and yet he wasn't even voted team captain by the players. And that is a question, that is a concern. You're bringing in a quarterback at the NFL level, especially if you invest a high draft pick in him. You're automatically assuming he's going to be one of the leaders, if not the alpha male of that locker room. And at college, people didn't view him as one of the leaders of the team. That's a significant concern. This is a significant concern. In terms of an NFL comparison for him, you know, because he went to Michigan State, some people might say Brian Hoyer. Some people might say Kirk Cousins. And I think his arm's much better than Kirk Cousins. I think he's bigger, stronger, and a better arm than Brian Hoyer. I think the more appropriate comparison, in my opinion, is Nick Foles. I believe, if I recall correctly, a guy at one point in time that actually did play at Michigan State before he ended up transferring down to Arizona, if my memory serves me correctly, and I don't feel like fucking bothering to look to see if I'm right or not. But Nick Foles, a guy with decent size. Now, Connor Cook is a little bit taller and a little bit bigger than Nick Foles, but similar. And Foles is big enough. He's got underrated mobility, similar to Connor Cook, who I think has underrated mobility. Nick Foles' arm, you know, especially when he was coming out of college, and I think at times at the NFL level, he's demonstrated to be stronger than many people probably thought it was. Same thing with Connor Cook. But man, they mirror themselves in the negative categories in a lot of ways. When you look at Nick Foles, both the college level and the NFL level, there were major concerns about his ability to read defenses. I thought at times he did a good job of using his eyes to be able to go through his progressions, but at other times he seemed to stare down his primary target far too often. When I look at Connor Cook, I see way too much of that same type of thing. You have accuracy issues, you have consistency issues with Connor Cook, similar to what you did with Nick Foles. You get those occasional flashes of really, really, really spectacularly good play, if not great play, sandwiched around periods of mediocrity to just flat out bad football. When I'm looking at Connor Cook, I see a lot of Nick Foles, and that's not necessarily a good thing now, especially, but it's not a good thing for his draft stock. The bottom line is this, is that Connor Cook should have declared for the 2015 NFL draft, because in that draft class, he would have clearly been the number 3 quarterback, even with some of the flaws that he had. If anything, it would have been wiser for him because his flaws wouldn't have been as exposed, because there would have been one less year of film for people like me and people in NFL front offices and scouting departments to pick apart and look through. I mean, in that draft class, after Winston Mariota, could he have won in the bottom portion of round 1? Maybe, to another quarterback desperate team. Would he have probably been a second-round pick? I most certainly think so. I don't know that he's going to be that this time around. And I think bottom line is we went through 2015, the reality didn't match the hype. People were assuming because he was a winning quarterback in a big-time program and he had a bit of a name recognition that automatically made him a big-time quarterback prospect. And that's just not the case. There are too many flaws, too many question marks, too little growth and development over the past 3 years for me to indicate that he is a big-time prospect or that he justifies a big-time pick. I just don't see it. He's got these physical tools, but doesn't make the most out of them. Again, that lack of growth and development, especially when you're talking about things like accuracy. I mean, that's the most fundamental thing you can do is throw the ball and hit the target. And there are far too many times where he doesn't, along with the fact that he sometimes makes some really, really terrible decisions. And I don't know that he makes enough great plays or other really good plays to compensate for the occasional really bad decision. And then you look at the fact that after 3 years, he still has a tendency far too often to stare down his primary target, and that's all he does. Now, by him not declaring for 15 and waiting till his redshirt senior season to play out and then go into the draft of 2016, I think he really, really negatively impacted his draft stock by giving everybody another year of film to watch. I look at him, I don't know yet where he ranks in terms of the quarterback class because I haven't finished scouting everybody and evaluating everybody. But I'd be stunned at this point if he was a top 5 prospect for me in this quarterback class. I'm just not as high on him now, especially as I've had all this time to go back and look and rewatch and revisit my way of thinking about him. I don't see why the hell I was ever high on him to begin with. I think it was because I watched too many small snippets and not enough of the overall body of work. To me, Connor Cook is nowhere near a first-round prospect. And I think a lot of mock drafts that still have him going in round 1 are crazy, just my opinion. Frankly, I'm not even sure he's worth a second-round pick. In fact, I don't think he is. When I look at him, he's a 3rd to 4th-round talent. Now, that's not saying you take him somewhere between the beginning portion of round 3 to the beginning portion of round 4. I'm suggesting more the late portion of round 3 to the middle portion to end portion of round 4. I think he's more of a day 3 prospect than he is a day 2 prospect, let alone a day 1 prospect. Now, he is a guy that if he got into the right system and had a good guy in front of him to learn from and got some quality coaching, that in 2 or 3 years, he could vastly outplay his draft position if he was taken in the 4th round. I don't dispute that. And from a physical standpoint, he should be one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in this class 5 years from now. I'm just not betting the farm with a high pick that it's ever going to happen. Because again, if he didn't grow and develop much as a quarterback in his last 3 years at Michigan State, how are you going to expect him to do it at the NFL level? To me, he's an overhyped, mid-round prospect. If you take him in the 4th round, it's a solid pick. Middle end portion of round 3, not going to knock you a ton. Any earlier than that, then I'm going to question that front office and their evaluation of the quarterback position because based off of what we've seen in film the past 3 years, Connor Cook just is not that good of a prospect, period. He is Nick Foles. Nick Foles was a mid-3rd round selection. That's the highest Connor Cook should go in this draft as well.